For over 2 decades, whispers of a letter written by Princess Diana to her eldest son haunted royal corridors. Hidden, sealed, suppressed. But now its contents are exposed. And what it reveals changes everything we thought we knew about her fears, her love, and her final warnings. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began with a quiet inventory, a routine archival review of personal effects stored in one of the lesser-known vaults beneath Kensington Palace. Dust-covered boxes, some untouched since the late 1990s, were catalogued in silence. Among them, a simple velvet-lined jewelry box. What lay inside would trigger a storm. Nestled between faded pearls and a tarnished charm bracelet was an unassuming envelope. Its seal had worn away slightly with time, but the words were unmistakable. Handwritten in the unmistakable slant of a mother's hand, "For William when the time is right." The ink had faded, but not enough to obscure the tremble behind each stroke. There, barely visible under the right light, were faint watermarks, tears, or perhaps something else. The envelope was fragile, paper soft and discolored by time. But its emotional weight was anything but delicate. This wasn't a casual letter. It was a message written under pressure, perhaps in fear. The kind of fear that comes with knowing too much and trusting too few. Once it was identified, alarms went up immediately. Royal aides, trained to detect and contain potential scandal, reacted within hours. The letter was discreetly removed, its contents read only by a handful of senior courtiers. Almost instantly, its very existence became classified. Several staff members were abruptly reassigned. The Royal Press Office initiated what sources now confirm was a blackout order. No leaks, no confirmations, no traces. But it was too late. A handwriting analyst, brought in to verify the letter, confirmed with quiet certainty it was Diana's. No forgery, no question. The loops in the W, the gentle curve of the D, the way she dotted her I's identical to hundreds of other private notes she'd penned. For years, conspiracy theorists had speculated that Diana had left behind something deeply personal, something meant only for her sons. Few believed it actually existed. Fewer still imagined it would one day see the light. And yet, now it has. The timing could not be more significant. The monarchy stands at a precarious crossroads, and into that tension drops a time bomb from the past. The letter, still partially redacted, has already shaken internal power structures. It poses uncomfortable questions about what Diana knew, about what she feared, and most crucially, about what she hoped her eldest son would understand when he finally read her words. But what could Diana have possibly written that the palace worked so hard to keep from her own son? In the final days before the crash in Paris, Diana was unsettled. Her phone calls were frequent, her instincts sharper than ever. What did she feel coming, and why did she write this letter just 72 hours before her death? There's something chilling about hindsight. We look back not with clarity, but with questions sharpened by grief. And no question looms larger than this: why did Princess Diana, on what would become her final trip, seem convinced that something was closing in? The glamorous escape with Dodi Fayed was meant to be a retreat, a breath of air away from the press, the palace, and the relentless machinery that had consumed her adult life. But Diana's demeanor told another story. Those close to her noted a visible shift. She smiled in public, but privately, she was restless, pacing. Her personal butler later recalled she had become obsessed with writing. Not diary entries, something more urgent. Pages, notes, letters. Each night she retreated with pen in hand and a mind spinning faster than ever. She couldn't shake the feeling. Something bad is going to happen, she reportedly told a confidant over a brief encrypted call from Paris. Her tone was low, unsteady. There was no drama in her voice, only an eerie certainty. She'd felt watched before. Followed. Betrayed. But this was different. There was a finality in her words. She reached out to William on the evening of August 30th, hours before the crash. The call, made from a hotel line, was cut short unexpectedly. Whether by accident or something more sinister, no one knows. But her frustration afterward was unmistakable. Witnesses claimed she looked shaken, as if the silence on the other end confirmed her fears. During the next day, Staff noted her repeated requests for stationery, pen and paper, envelopes, anything she could write on. Not the luxurious monogrammed kind she once used in Kensington. Just paper. She carried a leather pouch tightly pressed to her side for most of that afternoon. At dinner, she barely ate. Her eyes scanned the room. Every movement, every sound drew her attention. She was alert, too alert, as if bracing for an unseen blow. At one point, she asked to be alone. That's when the final letter is believed to have been written. The handwriting in the now revealed envelope matches the style, ink, and phrasing of what her staff saw her compose that day. All signs point to this single moment: a mother, hours from her death, desperately trying to send a message she feared would never make it. There was no chance to rewrite, to edit, to soften the message. What Diana wrote in those final 72 hours was raw, honest, urgent. A farewell wrapped in warning. A legacy passed through fear. What haunts us now is the knowledge that she may have seen the end coming, not by accident, but by design. That letter wasn't simply written from a place of emotion. It was written from the eye of a storm she no longer believed she could escape. And in that letter, Diana didn't just express love. She made predictions, dark ones. She saw it coming. Not just the crash, but what would unfold in the years after. Princess Diana's letter contained eerie foresight of betrayal, division, and the one person she feared most inside the palace walls. The words were unmistakable. "They will come for you too, William, when I'm gone." It wasn't metaphor. It wasn't a mother's anxious rambling. It was a stark warning, written with the clarity of someone who had spent years studying the shadows behind the throne. Diana understood the monarchy's machinery in a way few outsiders ever could. She had felt its pressure, its manipulation, its unforgiving need for control, and she knew that once she was no longer there to shield her sons, that same machinery would inevitably turn its gaze on them. Not to protect, but to mold, to tame, to own. The letter, though tender in tone, carried a cold, unrelenting truth. Her absence would not mean peace. It would mean exposure. Buried deep in the pages, she named names. Not directly, not in full. Diana was careful, but her references were clear enough to those who knew the palace's inner circles. One name stood out. A senior royal whose influence had grown quietly over time, operating not in the spotlight, but in the corridors where real power whispered. Diana feared this individual. Feared what he represented, the embodiment of the institution's ruthless survival instinct. She described him as charming in public, strategic in private, a mirror with no reflection. And more chillingly, she wrote, "He will smile when he takes the knife out." It was a metaphor, but the intent behind it was undeniable. Even more unsettling was her description of the monarchy itself, not just as a tradition or a lineage, but as something darker, an organism. An institution more dangerous than the press, she wrote, because it never shows its face. It moves through people. This wasn't a simple critique of royal formality. It was a declaration that the very system her sons were born into was capable of consuming them from the inside. And she was desperate to warn William before it did. She told him not to trust the comfort of titles. She said, "The crown is not made of gold, it's made of scars, and not all of them heal." In those few sentences, she unraveled the mythology that surrounds royal destiny. To Diana, the crown wasn't an honor, it was a burden wrapped in illusion. A symbol that demanded silence, demanded sacrifice, and punished authenticity. And if William ever hoped to wear it without losing himself, he would need to see it for what it truly was. Then came the most heartbreaking line of all: "They smile with poison." It wasn't just about the media, it was about family. About those closest to her who had smiled in her presence while plotting her removal behind closed doors. Her warning wasn't about a vague sense of danger, it was about betrayal from within. It was about people who knew the boys as children, and would later reshape them into weapons or figureheads, whichever the institution needed more. But her most disturbing prophecy didn't name William. It spoke of another, a younger brother, more emotional, less shielded. She predicted that one day he will marry love and be punished for it. A chilling prelude to the chaos that would follow decades later: public exile, media frenzy, and bitter divisions. Diana didn't have the details, but she saw the pattern. The rules were clear. conform or be cast out, and she feared that both her sons would one day be forced to choose between duty and freedom. But among the cryptic warnings lay something even more devastating: her regrets as a mother. Beneath the royal glamour and media spectacle, Diana battled a haunting guilt, one she never shared with the world. Until this letter. For the first time, we hear her confession, not to the world, but to her son. In a life defined by public adoration and relentless scrutiny, Diana rarely allowed the world to see her remorse. But in this letter, stripped of cameras, advisors, and protocol, she laid herself bare. The grief wasn't over what had happened to her, it was what she feared she had passed on. "You didn't choose this life," she wrote. And in those 6 words, the pain cracked open. She wasn't a monarch. She was a mother. And she knew deep down that she had delivered her son into the very system that had devoured her. There was sorrow there, but more than that, there was guilt. The guilt of seeing the trap and not being able to stop it. She spoke of moments lost, of years spent walking tightropes while William and Harry watched from palace windows. She apologized for the long nights, the missed birthdays, the carefully worded answers when her sons asked why the cameras never left. "I should have left sooner," she admitted. Not out of bitterness, but out of a desperate wish to reclaim what little innocence her children still had. But time, she wrote, had not been on her side. Every escape was met with a wall. Every plan, intercepted. Every ally, compromised. She feared what would be left behind if she fled, and feared even more what would remain if she didn't. The letter's most painful passages weren't about the press or the scandals. They were about motherhood under siege. Diana wrote that sometimes, even when she was in the room, she felt absent. That royal duty had hollowed her out in ways she hadn't understood until it was too late. She described tucking William into bed only to rush out for another event, smiling for photos while carrying the weight of decisions she wasn't allowed to make. She told him, without artifice or shield, that the crown had made her feel less human, and she feared it would do the same to him. "I am afraid," she wrote, "of leaving you both in the cold machine." That was how she saw it, not as a family, not even as a monarchy, but as a machine. One that ran on silence, sacrifice, and faces trained to hide the cost. It was never personal. That was the danger. No matter how much she loved them, no matter how fiercely she tried to protect them, she feared the institution would grind on, uncaring, unstoppable. Her letter was not an instruction. It was a warning, soaked in love and despair. And then, on the final page, a sentence that lingers long after the ink fades: "If I disappear, no, it wasn't my choice." A mother's last defense against a future she couldn't prevent. A coded truth, buried in a letter, sealed for a day she prayed would never come. But Diana wasn't just lamenting the past, she was trying to secure William's future. Beneath the royal glamour and media spectacle, Diana battled a haunting guilt, one she never shared with the world. Until this letter. For the first time, we hear her confession, not to the world, but to her son. Of all the words Diana poured onto paper in her final days, none cut deeper than those wrapped in apology. This was not the voice of a defiant icon or a rebellious royal. This was the voice of a mother carrying the weight of choices she was never truly free to make. In one aching line, she wrote, "You didn't choose this life." It wasn't just a statement. It was an admission of guilt that echoed far beyond the letter's pages. She had seen the cameras follow William's every move since he could walk, had watched him grow up through the same lenses that tore her apart. And now, she feared she had unwittingly handed him over to a future filled with those same trap smiles that bite, duties that suffocate, and a spotlight that never turns off. She didn't try to justify it. Instead, she mourned her inability to shield him. "I should have left sooner," she wrote, a brutal line that carried decades of conflict in just 6 words. She confessed that the pull of royal duty, the illusion of control, and the hope for change had kept her bound far too long. And in that time, she had missed moments she could never reclaim. William's questions, his fears, his quiet pleas for normalcy, all of them now haunted her. The cost of staying had always been her peace. But now, she feared it had become theirs too. She described the palace as a place where silence was demanded, not earned, where appearances mattered more than emotion, where even love, especially a mother's love, had to be measured and monitored. She remembered the nights she'd returned from public events too late to kiss her boys goodnight. The mornings where royal briefings stole her attention before they could steal a moment with her. She carried those memories like bruises beneath silk, never visible, but always present. Then came her most chilling confession, the fear that she might leave them behind in what she called the cold machine. That phrase, cold machine, appeared multiple times in her writings. It wasn't just metaphor. It was how she saw the institution that had both elevated and destroyed her. Diana feared the machine would devour her sons with the same hunger it had shown her. Strip them of voice, train them in the art of pretending, and ultimately deny them the kind of life they might have had beyond the palace walls. And finally, there it was, the line that no mother should ever have to write. If I disappear, know it wasn't my choice. A final attempt to give her son something that had always been stolen from her. Truth. Not a sanitized version, not a royal-approved edit, but the raw truth, unfiltered, unspoken until now. Diana didn't want her son to grow up wondering. She wanted him to understand, in time, that behind every photo and every fairy tale was a mother fighting battles she could never name aloud. But Diana wasn't just lamenting the past, she was trying to secure William's future. More than a goodbye, Diana's letter was a blueprint. She wrote with precision, urgency, and maternal instinct, guiding William not just as a son, but as a future king navigating a treacherous monarchy. There was no sentimentality in the way she laid out her thoughts. This wasn't a mother simply expressing love. It was a map drawn by someone who had walked through fire and wanted her son to avoid the same flames. Diana's words were deliberate, intentional. She didn't just tell William to be strong, she told him how. She drafted what could only be described as a quiet manifesto, small personal commandments she hoped he would cling to when the noise became too loud and the guidance around him too compromised. Among them, one line stood above the rest: lead with your heart, not the crown. It wasn't a rejection of duty, it was a warning not to let the role consume the man. Each piece of advice came tethered to a deeper lesson. Her guidance was not built on fairy tales or romanticism, but on bitter truths. You will be told what to think. Think anyway. That single sentence carried the weight of years spent being silenced, manipulated, steered. Diana knew how the palace worked, how it insulated itself with advisors, courtiers, and loyalists trained not to serve people, but to preserve power. She had learned, often too late, that authenticity was the enemy of control. Her hope was that William, armed with this knowledge, might become a leader who did not lose himself in the throne. She also gave him something more personal, something fragile and eternal. A reminder that even after her death, he was not alone. She wrote, "You are his anchor," referring to Harry. A plea wrapped in encouragement. Diana feared that once she was gone, her sons would be set adrift in different directions, shaped by competing agendas, distanced by roles they never chose. But she believed William had the strength to protect his brother, not just emotionally, but spiritually. She hoped he would resist the forces that would try to divide them. She saw in their bond something stronger than blood-shared pain, shared pressure, shared survival. And hidden in the folds of the letter, enclosed in a smaller envelope, was the simplest of keepsakes. A photo, faded, but powerful. Diana, holding both boys in her arms, smiling, unguarded, unpolished. A version of their life untouched by duty. She didn't leave it as a memento. She left it as a symbol. A quiet instruction to remember who they were before the crown got too close. To remember that the throne wasn't their beginning and didn't have to be their end. This wasn't just a letter, it was armor. Diana had written it to protect the son she wouldn't live to see become a man. To arm him with the wisdom she never received. To remind him, in moments of doubt, that strength wasn't in titles or tradition, but in truth. But Diana's protective hand didn't stop at advice, it extended into a quiet war she was fighting behind closed doors. Behind the gold curtains of Buckingham, Diana was no longer just a princess, she was a threat. Her letter reveals explosive insight into the power struggles and whispered betrayals that pushed her to the edge. She had long suspected it, but by the final months of her life, Diana no longer had doubts. There was a deliberate, calculated campaign to isolate her. Not just emotionally, politically. The palace had grown wary of her power, not as a royal but as a voice. A global symbol with a platform far greater than anyone anticipated. And in her letter to William, she confessed that the walls were closing in faster than she could escape them. She described an unseen campaign, a slow dismantling of her support system, loyal staff suddenly transferred, phone lines malfunctioning, letters important, personal letters never arriving at their destination. At first, she thought it was coincidence, but patterns formed, and she began to write everything down. The letter revealed what she couldn't say out loud, that she believed she was being watched, followed, not by strangers but by people she once trusted. She alluded to surveillance, both passive and invasive, rooms that felt too quiet, conversations that seemed to echo, notes misplaced, a sense that every move she made was being recorded not to protect her, but to discredit her. Diana believed they were building a case, not for security, but for silence. They didn't need to banish her if they could break her, and she wasn't going to let that happen without a fight. In one section, partially redacted by palace officials, she wrote of a meeting clandestine, urgent, and deeply personal. A whistleblower, someone within Charles' inner circle, had come forward. Diana never named them. But she did describe the information shared. Details of manipulated documents, intercepted correspondence, and planned media leaks designed to erode her credibility. She claimed to have proof of deception, enough, she believed, to force a confrontation with the firm. But that confrontation never came. Something, or someone, stopped her. Whether it was a warning, a threat, or a realization that no one would believe her, the letter doesn't say. But the silence speaks volumes. Parts of the letter are blacked out names, places, even entire paragraphs. Not by Diana, but by those who held it after her. The redactions are aggressive, clearly designed to obscure more than just privacy. Legal teams scrambled to bury the letter. Senior officials argued it was too destabilizing to release. But what could possibly be so dangerous in a mother's letter to her son? The answer, it seems, lies in the palace's fear not of fiction, but of truth. She had even begun exploring legal options. She mentioned speaking with attorneys abroad, looking into the possibility of publishing her journals in full, outside of UK jurisdiction. She never got the chance. Whether she ran out of time or was stopped before she could act, the result was the same. Her war remained quiet, but not forgotten. Her words, tucked away in that letter, still burn with urgency. If this letter had surfaced earlier, it might have changed history. And that's why some fought to keep it hidden. For years, this letter was buried physically and metaphorically. Those closest to Diana were silenced. Files vanished. Aides dismissed. The question isn't just what was in the letter, but who kept it from William. From the moment news broke of Diana's death, the royal apparatus moved swiftly outwardly to preserve dignity, but inwardly to control the narrative. Among the flurry of official responses, quiet operations began behind closed doors. Her private belongings, once stored in Kensington Palace, were swiftly transferred to undisclosed locations. Among them, the letter. Sealed. Undelivered. Unread. Not by accident, but by design. According to internal sources, the document was placed under restricted access just days after her funeral. A single file marked with a coded reference number, buried in an inventory of irrelevant artifacts. It became a secret within a secret. The cover-up wasn't loud, it was surgical. Former palace staff have since come forward under anonymity, revealing how they were instructed to remain silent. One former aide recalled being called into an unrecorded meeting where they were told, without explanation, that Diana's personal writings were now a matter of national security. The phrasing was deliberate. It transformed grief into protocol, shielding the monarchy from accountability behind a wall of bureaucracy. And when one senior archivist attempted to document the letter's existence in an internal log, they were removed from their post within weeks. No cause. No hearing. Just gone. Whispers continued. Among those who had glimpsed early drafts of Diana's final writings, fear began to take root. Some spoke of subtle warnings, letters left unanswered, career paths suddenly derailed, family members investigated. One staffer, who claimed to have read the original letter before it was sealed, described being followed for weeks after confiding in a close friend. The friend was later questioned by an unnamed government liaison. The message was clear: silence was safer. Meanwhile, legal efforts were ramping up behind the scenes. In 1998, just months after Diana's death, a quiet push emerged to reclassify her personal effects, including letters, journals, and private photographs, as state property. This maneuver, had it succeeded, would have placed her legacy under the full control of the crown. No family access. No public release. Just silence. Sealed behind legal walls. It failed, but not before critical items, like the letter to William, disappeared from traceable inventories. And then, years later, a misfiled box changed everything. While conducting a routine audit of personal effects belonging to the Spencer estate, a junior archivist stumbled upon an envelope bearing Diana's unmistakable handwriting. The label, "For William, when the time is right." What followed was a chain reaction. William was contacted discreetly. When he read it, his reaction was immediate and devastating. For all the years he had lived under the weight of his mother's memory, this was the first time he heard her voice again in her own words. Not through documentaries, not through secondhand stories, but from the letter she had written only for him. Now, after all these years, the truth is out, and the reaction inside the royal family is shattering. He was the heir, the obedient son, the symbol of continuity. But reading his mother's final words has left Prince William reeling and ready to make decisions that could break the monarchy itself. The moment he read the letter, something shifted. Those close to him described William as shaken to the core, not because the contents were shocking, though they were, but because of the clarity they delivered. For years he had lived with fragments, memories of his mother's voice, photographs blurred by time, stories passed down by those who never knew the full truth. But now, for the first time, he held in his hands her words, not rewritten by history, not softened by diplomacy, just Diana as she was. And in her truth he found something devastating, and something dangerous. He could no longer pretend. Not to himself. Not to the crown. Not to the world. What followed was immediate and deeply private. Behind closed doors, William confronted his father. No press, no protocol, no pleasantries. Just a son demanding answers from the man who had watched it all unfold. Sources say the conversation was heated, raw, and unfiltered. William demanded to know why the letter had been kept from him, why it had been buried, why no one had ever told him the full extent of Diana's fear, her warnings, her heartbreak. Charles, reportedly blindsided, defended the actions of the institution. But William wasn't looking for defense. He was looking for accountability, and he didn't get it. That moment marked a turning point. William began to question not just his family, but his future. Everything he had been groomed for, everything he had accepted, now felt tainted by the very system his mother had warned him about. For the first time, the man who had embodied royal duty began speaking privately about change, not cosmetic, but structural. Conversations emerged about reshaping the monarchy from the inside, stripping it of its rigid traditions, humanizing it, dismantling the old power structures that had cost his mother everything. But change within the royal walls doesn't come without a cost. As William's internal crisis unfolded, the rift with Harry deepened. The letter, meant to unite them, instead exposed how far they had drifted. Harry, already at odds with the institution, viewed the revelations as vindication. William, still tethered to duty, struggled with the implication that he had unknowingly become part of the very machine Diana feared. Tensions escalated. Words were exchanged. Trust eroded further. What had once been a shared pain began to feel like a personal betrayal. Each brother, haunted by the same loss, now stood on opposite sides of the legacy it left behind. And then, without announcement or fanfare, William vanished. For days, no one knew where he had gone. But quietly, he returned to Althorp Diana's resting place. Alone, he walked the grounds where she once played as a child, where her story began long before the palace claimed her. Those who saw him described it as less of a retreat and more of a reckoning. A prince not mourning, but recalibrating. Everything he'd been raised to believe was now under scrutiny, not by the press, not by the public, but by himself. And just when the public thought the saga had reached its peak, came the final twist no one saw coming. One letter revealed her truth. The second was never meant to be found. Tucked away beneath her childhood writing desk, sealed with a red wax stamp, it's addressed to someone else. To the one I could never protect. It was supposed to be a simple renovation, a clearing of old furniture from Althorpe's East Wing. But among the dust-covered memories and long-forgotten heirlooms, something extraordinary emerged. Beneath a false bottom in Diana's childhood writing desk, workers discovered a small envelope unopened, untouched by time. It was different from the first. No royal crest. No official stationery. Just plain parchment and a blood-red wax seal bearing a subtle initial D. What stunned them most, though, wasn't the secrecy. It was the inscription. 5 chilling words. To the one I could never protect. Handwriting experts were brought in. The strokes matched Diana's unmistakably hers. Same ink. Same pressure. Same flourishes in the signature. But this letter, unlike the one addressed to William, has remained unread. Locked away under strict orders. Because this time, the message wasn't meant for a future king, it was meant for the son who walked away from the crown. My darling H. That's how she addressed him. And from the moment that detail leaked, the world erupted in speculation. Was this Diana's final message to Harry? A premonition? A goodbye? Or something far more dangerous, an account of truths too heavy for history to carry? Unlike William's letter, which was quietly withheld, this one sparked immediate chaos. Legal advisors representing multiple royal entities moved fast. Some argued it should be sealed permanently under national security statutes. Others, notably from the Spencer side, insisted it was a personal possession, not a state document. As debates raged, Harry's name was never officially confirmed. But insiders claimed he was notified within hours of the discovery. His reaction? Silence. No statements. No interviews. Just one request that the letter remain private, at least for now. But the silence only fed the storm. The public wanted answers. If Diana had something more to say, if she left behind a final piece of herself, then who had the right to decide whether it could be read? Activists, historians, journalists, and even former palace insiders have since weighed in. Some demand transparency, citing the people's right to know. Others fear that opening the letter would ignite a fire that could never be contained. A royal reckoning, buried for decades, suddenly threatening to break wide open. And at the center of it all, 2 brothers, once united by grief, now divided by truth. There are whispers of what might be inside. References to events never explained. To decisions she regretted. To warnings she could not share publicly. Some say the letter contains names. Others believe it holds her last attempt to protect Harry from a system she believed had already failed him. But no one knows for sure. Not yet. What is certain, though, is that the letter exists, that it was hidden for a reason, and that the moment its seal is broken, nothing will ever be the same again. Diana's voice was silenced once, but with every word she left behind, the echo grows louder and the monarchy trembles in its wake. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.